For a train buff, this place is holy ground. These are all locomotives collected from the Hijaz Railway. We haven't quite left the suburbs of Damascus yet, but you can understand why I had to come here even in the pouring rain. Just looking at some of these engines and their builders' plates tell us that they were pulling trains around during the time of the war. It's pretty sad to see them here in this condition, but at least they're still here. Well, that's it for Damascus. Time to head south to Amman and the end of our story. It wasn't until September 1918 that finally our troops got to see the centre of Amman. Below me is the Roman Amphitheater, and under here was where the actual village, the centre of the village, was. Now this is a thriving city of something like 2 million people. Then these were bare hills, and down in here, often in their diaries as mentioned, and we've got some great photos of them like tourists having a look at the Roman Amphitheater below me. Where I stand now has become quite a landmark in the city of Amman, Jordan. This is the old Hijaz Railway Bridge. The railway this is on its way south now towards Amman, towards the Hijaz. You would climb up through these mountains. There's also a tunnel just over here. So these become strategic points that the Allies would like to have taken out. When we did our first raid across to Amman, we arrived on the other side of the city. I think it was the Camel Battalion and some others came around the back to try and blow this bridge or blow the tunnel. They failed, they weren't able to do it. Even Lawrence of Arabia never got to blow this bridge. It still stands today and it's still being used today. Around me now you can hear the cry, the Muslim cry to prayer. Today is Friday, it's their holy day. And we tried to go into the old Hijaz railway station. There's still old steam engines and it's still kept exactly the same as it was 90 years ago. But sadly we couldn't go in there because today's the holy day, we weren't allowed. We're going to be getting on a plane very soon. We're coming to the close of our story. Once the Allies had taken Amman, of course the push to Damascus was on and the war was over. There's one more story to tell right near the Queen Alia airport. It's just like all the other stations that we've seen everywhere we've been. And once again, there's a great story to tell at this railway station. What had happened occurred here just a few days before the other troops, our guys, had got into Damascus. So around about the time we stood at the bridge over the Jordan, the bridge of Jacob's daughters, around about the same time, what had happened here is troops, about 5,000 Turkish troops were cut off about 70 kilometres south of here, a place called Man. And they were trying to make their way up to escape, but basically Amman had fallen and they pretty much knew it was over for them. But the battle wasn't over completely. They were marching up this way, up the railway line, about 5,000 troops. And as they marched up, Bedouin, who had not been with Lawrence of Arabia, they'd all gone north by now, but Bedouins had started to gather around them wanting retribution. They also knew that the war was ended. So as they marched up here, there ended up being up to 10,000 Bedouins circling 5,000 Turks. The Turks made their way to this railway station. The leadership stayed here and they dug in about a 2 to 3 kilometre perimeter right around here to aim their guns at the Bedouin. Now at this stage, a very small amount, under 200 Australians had come down the railway line to meet them. They arrived, they saw the situation. A small delegation came out from the Turks up to the Aussies and they said from the commander, we will surrender, no problem, we will surrender to the Australians, but if we do, it's the Australians' responsibility to make sure the Bedouin don't get them. Now the situation up to now was the Bedouin we're talking retribution, we're not talking prisoners of war. They'd been under the oppression of the Turks for far too long and they wanted payback time. So it was a volatile situation. The Aussies went away, a general came down, there was a lot of conflab over what shall we do, what shan't we. It wasn't until a General Ryrie came in and he was known as a bit of a politician, and this is what he did. He got a couple of sheiks from the Bedouin, brought them in to the centre of the Turks with the 160 or so Aussies. They all came into the centre and met together. He said, we will allow the Turks to keep their weapons overnight and we will keep these sheiks here. He said to the sheiks, if you have any of your men fire upon the Turks, we will shoot you first and then we will fire against the Bedouin. So the Aussies made camp here, made camp with the Turks, but the Turks, their enemy up until this day, were allowed to keep their weapons in their machine guns aimed on the Bedouin. Now they started cooking fires and just were going to spend the whole night here knowing that Australian reinforcements would arrive in the morning. And so all through the night, apparently the Bedouin was sort of just rallying, trying to get in at the Turks. There'd be the odd machine gun burst going on around here. And the history says that the Australians were like yelling out, they were cooking campfires with their enemy and yelling out, yeah, go on Jacko, get him Jacko, you go for it. Is that a bizarre twist to a war story or what? It turns out it was the New Zealanders came in the morning, the situation was diffused, the Turks will march north, and that marks the end of the war, not just for the guys here, but pretty much for all of Jordan, all of Israel, and soon Damascus. Well, that about brings us to the end of our story, and what a befitting place to finish but here in one of these beautiful Ottoman railway stations. This one is certainly the best preserved of all that we've seen. I do hope you've enjoyed the story as much as I've enjoyed presenting it and seeing all these wonderful sights, these amazing places. We've visited 3 different nations, and I believe we've really captured part of the history of Australia. Much as what happened in the Middle East is very small in significance compared to what happened in Europe in the First World War. Still, the Anzac humour, the Anzac hardship and the Anzac sacrifice is just as real here as anywhere else. I think we should be proud of what occurred here. Our guys did great work and they left a great legacy. We still have good relationships in the countries where we've been, and people have been more than friendly and more than interested in hearing about our connection with the places we've visited. I guess it's clear now that Anzacs did an awful lot in the Middle East beyond Beersheba in 1917 and 1918. I do hope you've enjoyed Anzacs in the Holy Land beyond Beersheba.